Cassandra Eve, and I'm here today with Paola Trafford. We're exploring the next sacred feminine archetype in my book, Sacred Pathways, Discovering Divine Feminine Archetypes in You. And this time we're exploring Juno, who is also known as Hera. And she is the archetype of the wife or the partner. More about Hera in a moment. But Paola, would you introduce yourself? You're a woman of many talents, so I'd rather you did it than I.
Oh, hi Cassandra. Thank you so much, first of all, for inviting me to do this. It's always really interesting how other people perceive you. And I've also really enjoyed your book. It's just been a real inspiration to read, and really so well written and so beautiful to kind of understand you and your work and your talents from a different angle from reading. So I've really enjoyed that. So yes, what do I do? I've been a natural health practitioner for around 30 years, and a multi-complementary therapist, do all sorts of alternative health practices, and a Pilates teacher and a Kumye meditation, yoga, mindfulness practice teacher. So I think that's I do quite a lot. So that's really, and run a business called Trafford House, which is online classes and courses.
Great, thank you. And we'll go more into that as we run through the interview. And one of the, it always intrigues me why I invite particular women, or why I get this sense of a particular woman with a particular archetype. And I've known you for quite a few years now, both as a friend and as a colleague, because we facilitate the monthly moon gatherings together at the new moon, which is something I really deeply enjoy and that we get some profound feedback from. But one of the reasons you really popped up for me with Juno, or Hera as she's also known, was that I see you as someone who has a profound sense of commitment to whatever you engage, and I really admire that in you. So let's talk more about her. And I want to give you an overview to start with. So Juno is the Roman name, and in my work, because I'm also an astrologer, I use the names that we have in astrology for the archetypes, but Juno is also known as Hera, and she's married to her brother and also her husband, Zeus, who's the head honcho god. He's like the king of the gods, and he's her partner and her brother. And there are various mythologies about how they got together. But before they married, or before they got together, Hera is a goddess in her own right. She's linked and rooted into the ancient goddesses, the pre-patriarchal goddesses, Ishtar and Inanna. And she's known as the triple goddess. And the triple goddess is comprised of three different maturities of woman: the maiden, the mother, and the crone. So when Hera, or Juno, as we're also calling her, came to marriage, she came to marriage as a woman who was already complete in herself. And yet within her, there was this longing for union with her divine partner, her king, her consort, her god, however you want to describe that. And their journey together, which I'll go into a bit more later in our chat, brought out the quality of commitment in her. So I'm going to read a passage from my book now. This is what it looks like for those of you. Well, it doesn't have that label on it, actually. That's just saying it's my copy that I've scribbled on. But yeah, that's the book if you've not seen it. So Juno's message. So each of the archetypes that I work with, I offer in my work, and that I've also written about in this book, have a message for us. This is why they're important to us, because they have been forgotten through our patriarchal era, the last couple of thousand years. Juno's message: I desire the sacred union here on earth. I commit to its fulfillment. And as we know, those of us who are in partnership, you know, that's a big commitment. Juno's primary calling is to intimate partnership and its fulfillment. She's the guardian of the principle of conscious relationship. As Queen of Heaven, she's not interested particularly in other aspects of life. Why would she be? She's already complete in herself, and she is called to express that fullness on the earth. She innately knows the potential for sacred union as the peak of human expression. She has no doubt that this is her purpose. Relationship, however, is not just Juno's purpose, it's her delight. She will give everything, whether it's her love or her shadow, for the sacred union to be known. Juno holds the pinnacle of love that we long for. We see the archetypal Juno marriage played out in our culture through celebrity marriages with their apparent glamour and dramas. We know the pattern of falling in and out of love in our own lives. If Juno is strong for us as individuals, we yearn for the beloved. We can't wait for him or her to come along. We are called by the potential. It's full of light and life. We may recognize the highs and lows of romance as the stuff of novels and films, yet we know they represent a truth too. For underneath our pain, cynicism, or fear, we long for love, whether we are aware of it or not. Somewhere in us, we know it is always possible. Magic is always available. Relationship is always imminent. Juno's yearning for union mirrors our own desire to deeply know love on the earth. If we have this calling for partnership, we are wise to recognize that an intimate relationship requires commitment. Commitment is relatively easy when we're in love's pleasure. When the shadow arises, it's more of a challenge. This challenge is twofold. Firstly, it's to stay connected to oneself in the darkness of conflict or pain. Secondly, it is to stay with the knowing of love within the relationship when it seems to have gone. Love's expression is just like the flow of seasons. Spring's blossoming gives way to summer fullness that falls into autumn as nature begins to draw in her bounty. Winter's quiet is a time of return to earth. In relationship, we live the same cycle. The flowering of attraction is expression through love and intimacy, then the disappearance of connection as challenge comes along. Inevitably, we return to ourselves at some point, if just for a moment or two. This is the winter of love, the return to aloneness, perhaps to coldness. In the natural cycle, the dawning of spring is assured. We don't know when or how it will look, yet we know it will come. In relating, the renewal of love is always a potential. If we winter well, spring is a promise. Its potential arrives in the embrace of the whole cycle. Juno reveals this cycle in relationship and guides us through it. So she is the one. She can also be connected to other in a core kind of partnership, say for an instance, a business partnership where it would call in that kind of commitment that's needed in that one-on-one process to meet both the light and the darkness. So I want to start by asking you, Paola, about the longing for love. Now, I know your partner, Craig. I've known him almost as long as I've known you, and I know you've been together for a long time. But when did you first experience that longing for love, and how was that for you? What were you calling for in a partnership?
I think because I didn't feel completely loved and seen in my birth family, that longing for love was there quite young. And in my first real relationship, I really committed to the relationship, and the partner I was with was mentally abusive and had asked me to get married, and I was very confused because I didn't feel I'd got anyone I could turn to for guidance, and I committed to get married to him, and within 6 weeks we'd broken up, because through that commitment I realized I couldn't be with him, and that was when I was very early 20s, and that was quite a profound realization that through the complete commitment the relationship fulfilled itself very quickly, and then had other relationships, and then there was another big relationship, and the same thing happened. I didn't know, I felt like I was being emotionally abused in it, but had given myself to the relationship. So again was asked to be married and committed, and within 6 weeks again the relationship was over. And after that I met Craig. It felt that I kind of realized that I was kind of not going to be in these abusive relationships, but it was the commitment that got me out of them as well.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? It's like it's a bit like the Buddha, you know, when he puts his finger in the earth and says, I'm staying here. It's like then we call in everything to help us realize what the truth of the circumstances are, and also our inner truth in terms of, is this really real? Yeah, profound. So looking at the mythology of Zeus and Hera, there is that theme in the mythology, because you know, we first come across them. There are two main myths about how they got together. So they were brother and sister. One of the myths is simply that they got married and then they had a 300-year honeymoon. And then the stuff started to come up, you know. I mean, wow, this is the realm of the gods and goddesses, obviously. But then the other one, a more shadowy myth, which represents the collective themes that are around a lot in this mythology from the Greek and the Roman culture, which was a time when the old earth-based and earth-honoring cultures and the goddess-worshipping cultures were being taken over by patriarchy, and the matrilineal line, you know, inheritance through the mother was ending, and there was a lot of control coming in. And in this second myth, Zeus desired Hera, and so he plotted. There's lots of plotting in these myths. You know, he thought, okay, I'm going to disguise myself as a bird, but first, before he did that, it's a cuckoo actually. Before he did that, he created this massive storm, and Hera was wandering on the mountainside, as these goddesses often are when things happen. And this great storm came. She took shelter under a tree, and then she saw this cuckoo, and she invited this cuckoo in onto her lap so it could shelter. And as soon as he was on her lap, he kind of nestled under her cloak into her breast, and then took his true form as Zeus, as the god. And he then raped her, and then felt guilty about that, and so married her. So we get the two kind of cultural and personal themes that come around in these myths of the abusive relationship and, you know, the perfected relationship, let's describe it that way. And often the Hera archetype will be called up strongly in a woman when there is a betrayal. And of course, betrayal can cover lots of things. It can cover a man or a woman not being honourable. It can cover other partners being involved, jealousy, and all these really dark, shadowy emotions that we journey through to come to both the fullness of ourselves and to evolve in that, and also potentially the fullness in partnership. And Juno Hera is very much about this potential to realize our own fullness and the fullness in partnership. So I'm going to read another piece from the book to introduce more of her themes. Human relationships, and I'm speaking about human there, often involve a trade-off of some kind. Yet Juno stands in her sovereignty, so she knows who she is. She knows in her bones that conscious partnership expresses a synergy of intimacy and individuality. She recognizes that although she deeply longs for divine union on the earth, it is also her greatest challenge. Maturity recognizes that inevitably there are times in any relationship when the synergy changes through necessity. There are times of busyness, stress, and other focus. Then there are times when connection slips into old patterning. An innate imbalance looks different to a temporary shift. And this is, what we're speaking about in terms of the shadow, when there isn't really that connection, and yet when there is a connection, but you're just going through some of the darkness. Ingrained beliefs and emotional patterns tend to express consistently where there is an innate imbalance. They're habitual. For instance, in overgiving, we may expect love in return because we're running on empty inside. In over-accommodating a partner, we may alternate between being pushy for love with retreating in resentment. Perhaps one partner is more inclined to sacrifice personal desires than another. This is where Juno's desire for union can work against truly conscious relating. If we desire it too much, we can become appeasing, where compromise is an easy way out of standing alone, or it is done to avoid conflict. If one partner, Juno can be found in either male or females, is always accommodating in order to keep the peace, the relationship fails to thrive. Sacrifice can also be an agenda. Always being the one who is selfless bestows subtle power. There are so many games that we play in this dance. None of these games are wrong. After all, relating can be the most challenging aspect of our lives, and staying awake can be difficult. They are simply games through which we can evolve. So, what have you discovered in your partnership, your partnerships before Craig and then your longer term partnership, about those games and the dynamics of the games?
It sounds a very selfless thing to say, and I'm sure I have played games, but I've always committed to love, and really loved my partners. And bar one, I'm always the person that's ended the relationship because I haven't felt that I've been met because of the games going on within the relationship. I'm sure I must have played games. I'm sure I probably still play games, but I do my very best to not play games. I do my very best to come from my heart and come from love. Because for me, playing games is just a waste of time. It's wasting my time, it's wasting my energy, it's wasting the other person's time and energy as well. And actually coming from the heart and having heart connection is so much more interesting and so much more fulfilling, so much more real and nourishing, and it's where the potency is of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And a teacher of mine many years ago, he always described love as a can opener. He said it opens up the can of worms. So what happens within your partnership when that happens? One or other of you has opened up that can of worms in the partnership. How do you transform that? How do you connect, and how do you get through that, either individually or both, or together?
And interestingly, it happened this morning. Craig was triggered by something I said, and so I just stood and very strong in myself, very grounded in the earth, and I allowed him to speak until he'd finished, and didn't take what he was saying personally. I just heard him and then reflected back to him what I'd heard him say, and that I was and there was some anger and rage and energy in the way he was talking to me, but I held space for him and reflected back, as I said, what I heard him say, and said that I felt honoured that he felt safe enough to express himself, which at that point, then when somebody feels heard and somebody feels that they can let out their shadow in a safe place, then the transformation occurs, that suddenly then the tenderness arises because there's a connection. So that's, and then Craig would has done the same for me. Many times, and sometimes because Craig does EFT, emotional freedom technique, we've created this thing between us where we have a tapping row, which sounds funny, but we tap on the sides of our hand and have a row. But it very quickly, because when you are in your shadow, when you are triggered or activated, it's never about the person, it's always about something that's happened in the past. So we know that this is what we're doing, is we're activated, and this needs clearing. So we have a tap row, and sometimes I go tap row. So we quite quickly, one of us will signal and we'll start tapping, because we know that this energy needs releasing, and we're safe with each other, and let's just let it out. So even this morning we were both tapping whilst Craig was letting out what needed to come out, and then ultimately it's then dissolved, a realization comes through and a healing occurs. And then within that there's such tenderness, because I can relate it to making love. When you've made love, there's a tenderness, but with this, you're still you're naked with each other, but in your emotional body it's just a different nakedness, and within that nakedness, feeling safe to show yourself and be vulnerable and be is actually sometimes more scary than sexual union.
Yeah, absolutely, because there is that rawness of being naked emotionally, that is a different kind of nakedness. So in terms, go on.
Well, I was just saying, I must say that I do feel that it's quite difficult for men to get to that place, and for women not to, I'd speak of myself, to not personalize them being vulnerable, and to hold that space for them. I feel so important, because men find it so difficult to let that come through, and to feel safe that if I do let it come through and I'm not the hero, the woman's not going to fall to pieces on me and make it all about her. And that for me is a real act of love, to be that support for my man in that time when he needs me to be strong for him and to support him.
Absolutely. And that brings in that element of Juno, that's about being that Queen of Heaven archetype, that wise woman who recognizes that this isn't personal, it's not about her, and her man needs her to hold space in a loving, accepting way for whatever he needs to transform. That's really profound. And for that to happen, in my experience, it requires that we're committed also to our own process of individual evolution, as well as that in the partnership. So how has has that worked with you and Craig in terms of your individuality? Because I know you both have really full lives. You have growing teenage children as I knew them, and we'll talk about those in a moment. But in terms of your individuality, how has that worked in such a full life and such a committed partnership?
I think I've been committed to my spiritual path since I was 17, and so I'm completely committed to my spiritual evolution and to evolve as much as I possibly can in this lifetime, and to clear as much as I can within myself and my ancestral patterns, and do whatever I'm called to do on the planet. And Craig is the same. So we've both have that. When we came together, we both had that already in play. And I would say that Craig and I are as committed to ourselves as we are to each other. That the commitment to our own spiritual growth, we are both completely committed to each other's spiritual growth. And there's a real sense of selflessness in that we will do things and go out of our way for each other, and regularly, I'll get you a drink. No, I'll get you a drink, or I'll give you a massage. Oh, I'll give you a massage. There's always a giving between us, always, and it's rather than in a lot of relationships, it's about what can I get, what can I take. With Craig and I, it's what can I give. It's always what can I give. We are really committed to giving to each other, and that's a highest calling.
And when you first got together, did you make that conscious commitment together? Did you actually voice that, or were you just both in that place where that was happening very naturally? Did you actually say to each other, look, this is what's really important to me, these are my values, this is my fullness, what about you? That kind of conscious conversation.
Well, interestingly, yes, we did, but that was because Craig's first wife had died, and he had a daughter, Aisling, who was about 7 or 8 at that time. She was 6 when her mum died, and Craig said to me that he was feeling ready for another relationship, but he was putting Aisling first, and that he would not allow her to have her heart broken again, and that if we got together, that it was a commitment. It was a commitment, and it's interesting because we were friends for 1.5 years, but to have that conversation with someone before you actually enter into a relationship is not how it normally happens, is it? You get 2 or 3 years down the line and then have those conversations and realise actually we want different things. But we both discussed how did we see a relationship going? What was it that we wanted? Did we want more children? How would Aisling come into it? So we actually discussed all of that before getting into the relationship, and I fully knew that if I was getting into a relationship with Craig, I was also completely committed to his daughter. So that was also part of the package.
Profound. I mean, I had a similar relationship where we actually consciously spoke about what do we want as individuals, what do we want to create, and it's like creating that conscious foundation where obviously expectations come up within that over time, but because that's part of the process of the healing. But when you make that connection to be in conscious partnership, that you're both coming from the same place, and that's so vitally important, isn't it? Yeah. Now I'm going to invite you to speak more about your boys, and I'm grinning because I remember the story when you when you told me about what you asked to come in with them, and that's part of the commitment process to actually already going into this partnership with Aisling, who you committed to be there for her as well, but then having your own, birthing your own children. Will you speak about that and commitment?
I think through my journey of relationships with men and seeing a lot of women struggling in relationship with men, I called for two males to come through me that would help change the planet in a positive way, and my gift to the world would be two loving, kind, gentle men that would be that had Craig as a positive role model, as a father, and that would do some positive good on the planet. And they've both come through with very, very, very high energy levels. In medical terms, both got ADHD, one very high level ADHD, and the other one's got ODD, which is oppositional defiance disorder, which basically, they call these disorders, but they're not really disorders, they're superpowers. But the eldest is the ultimate rebel, and the other one's got so much energy, can't sit still. So they have been absolutely powerhouses of children that will not conform.
And what's that brought out in you, other than obviously the commitment to just be there as best you can? How have they helped you as, warrior beings? How have they helped you to evolve in terms of relationship?
Well, they've completely broken me. I can say they have absolutely broken me. And when I say that, I actually mean they've broken my ego. And it's been an excruciating process, because ego death isn't pleasant. Yeah. But yes, so I see them as my biggest teachers, really. I call them my llamas, because they've where they've not conformed, and in so many ways, not sitting still at school, not wanting to wear certain clothes, whatever it is, they've made me question all of those things. Actually, why do you have to wear a uniform? All of these questions, and I haven't had the answers, because the system says, and actually, well, I hate it. So I've, all of those things, well, I can actually understand that. Yes, it is a stupid rule. Or even one of my sons had long hair and the school wouldn't let him have long hair. So all of these, I think what I was wanting to say, that rules that we have in our society that don't make sense, they have questioned every single step of the way. I want to wear my giraffe socks to school, not black ones, and on and on and on, and and knowing that I've had teachers or parents and people looking at me because they've not conformed, so therefore I'm not conforming. So it's been, but actually I realise that they're pointing out to me where the reality isn't actually, it's not truth. It's irrelevant. So many times that's been the case, and I can just thank them for opening my eyes to these things that I perhaps would never have realised before. They've really, so when I say they've really, they've really woken me up. Yeah, they've really woken me up, and I'm eternally grateful for that.
That's profound. It's profound, because when you reflect on you know, how the earth is now, what we're facing now in this huge, you know, shift that we're in at the moment, particularly over the last 18 months or so. It's that kind of energy that's needed, you know, that energy to question and to challenge and to understand, particularly when what's coming at us is coming purely from control. You know, that there's no real health or well-being behind it. So, you know, they're equipped for what, as they mature into adults, you know, they're going to need to face. That strength, that warrior spirit is what's needed for our world to change, and for us to really recognize what we need to do to truly connect with each other and to take care of our earth and the things that are truly important, rather than the, you know, going with the rules just because somebody else says you have to go with the rules when they make no sense. Yeah. I can it's one of the things that I've always really admired about you, always really moved me actually about you, it's deeper than admiring, is that tenacity, you know, to stay with it even though you are being broken, and to understand the bigger picture, the bigger purpose behind that it's not personal. In fact, actually, you know, there's a kind of chuckle inside when we know as individuals that we've called that in, you know, for our own undoing. And I can chuckle inside at that one, because I can see the places I've done that in my life, and I've called it in without realizing on a human level, you know, what it's going to take and how it's going to look, or how it's going to play out. But there's no turning back. It's like the red pill and the blue pill, you know, in the Matrix. There's no turning back. It's just simply to keep taking one step after another in doing the best that we can to be true and to be loving.
And I must say, Cassandra, you've done all three kids' charts, astrological charts, and the youngest son, you said he's here to change the school system, and he's basically, he's on purpose. He's doing what he's here to do, and that really had such a profound effect on me, because you kind of have your chart done, or I have had my chart done, and you think that the purpose is, you know, oh, when I get to 40 I'll become a this and that, but realizing that actually you're on purpose when you're born, and that actually there's things that you'll grow into, but that Jakai was on purpose. He was there to change the school system, and he was doing it. And then I realized that he could only do that through me and Craig, and that it was our unpaid job. It was, that was actually, this is the real work. The rest of it, yes, I might be doing this, that and the other and teaching or whatever, but actually the real work that the spirit is wanting is for the school system to be changed through my son, and he's basically creating the conditions, and we're being his voice. And that came through the understanding from your chart for reading with Jakaya. So that was really amazing, and I think it's an amazing thing to get your child's chart done.
Thank you. Yeah, for me it's a real privilege to be able to see and point towards in the chart, you know, that bigger picture, that inner potential that can really, it can help hold us in the commitment, actually, when we have that understanding. That's my experience of it. It's like when I can view it from that more soulful, higher, lighter, brighter perspective, then the understanding can help me in my commitment when things get really, really tough or challenging. So just to finalize, I'd like to ask you, what would you say to a woman that you knew who was asking about relationship commitment, who was going through, you know, a difficult time, challenging time in her relationship, what would you say to her? What would you point her towards?
Well, my, you know, twice when I had been in really challenging relationships, that's just fully commit. That real full commitment is life changing. It may break the relationship, but it was going to break. You know, it was going to break anyway. You're just sort of holding on to it, not breaking through fear, and that full heart commitment that I'm going to go. We are going to get married. I'm going to spend the rest of my life with you, and then with all of that full commitment, all of the thoughts around can you spend the rest of your life with someone, and they all come up. Everything comes up, and it fulfills itself.
That's profound, yeah, because it's that stepping deeper in, rather than what we can tend to do in relationships, kind of like in out in the brain. Is this the right one, or is this not the right? I don't like it when he does that. I don't like it when she does that. All that kind of stuff that we just go round on this hamster wheel, rather than actually saying, I'm here for divine union, Juno energy. Step right in, and then you can see clearly, often very quickly, as you've described, yes, it's fulfilled. We're together, or we're no longer together. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for that. Thank you. So I've really enjoyed our chat today, and thank you so much for sharing so much about your life and your relationships. And there'll be more information about Paola if you would like to explore what she shares through her work at the end of this video. Thank you for watching.
Thanks so much, Cassandra. It's been a pleasure.
You're very welcome.